What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Phil Caivano of Monster Magnet and his awesome new solo project. Thank you so much for being here today, man. It's great to have you here.
Oh, great surprise today, man. Really good to see you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
yes.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Shout out to Dan, my coworker, who's making a shit ton of noise right now in the background.
Good. Make all the noise. This is a fun one.
Yeah, yeah. It's always cool when we have mutual friends. But this debut solo album is absolutely kick ass. Thank you for giving us this because when you open up with Come and Get Me and you end with Face the Music, it really just makes for such an epic, down and dirty, and easy listen. Was there any thought process going into this reading it? I know that this was, born out of downtime from the pandemic. Was this like a vision that you've always had for a long time, or was this sort of like a spur of the moment idea?
It was a little bit of both, honestly. I'd always had some things like on the back burner, never quite finished them. Like, okay, having my own studio, I'm always like tinkering around and recording riffs and it started bubbling up before the pandemic, honestly. And I was working with a few guys, and then I got busy with Monster Magnet, and again, that got put on the back burner. And then once the pandemic started, I was writing some more, and I contacted the people who were Wendigo Productions, who was involved with getting this record out. And I was like, hey, kind of back at them, listening to the stuff. You still want to do this? And they're like, yeah, we thought you didn't want to do it. So I went to Bob Pantella with a couple of songs that I had written, and he's a Magnet drummer, and we decided to finish it, and that's how it kind of all happened,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
But there's always been like I'm always have a few things going on, and never really put enough time, had enough time to really do my own thing, because I really do enjoy working with other people. And Windorf always keeps me really busy, and a lot of my creative stuff, I'm always really happy, fulfilled with the Magnet stuff. But I had a little time,
Hmm.
as a few of us did, and I decided to finish it up.
Mm. Well, because like I've always admired and loved the riffs and everything that you brought into Monster Magnet. You really have your own signature guitar sound. But like when you now because you also played guitar on here as well as bass, but also took the role of vocals in a way because you took so many roles in making this and your album is on the name. Do you feel like more of yourself is in this than maybe what was expressed in Monster Magnet? Not to discredit your role in Monster Magnet, but it's between four guys and it's a band and this is a solo project. So do you feel like you were able to put more of yourself into this?
Yes, and it kind of just happened that way because of like, I never really wanted to have a side band. I never really wanted to have like a side band like some other guys do when they're in their main band. And this kind of, again, it just kind of like evolved into that. So it came down to like, I started doing it, and like, of course, with all of like, with the initial thing of COVID, of all that like forced isolation and all this kind of stuff. I won't really call it isolation, but like, I was picking up the guitar, I was picking up the bass, and I've played bass on a lot of the studio stuff for years. And I was like, it just kind of evolved into that. So it is more of me. You know what I mean? And then I never really wanted to be a front man. I did that years ago. I'm like, I can't sing, like whatever. I never considered myself anything like that. But I was pushed and driven to do it, and with the timing of it, but like, to answer the question, yeah, it's a lot more of me, and that's why it's like I didn't get too caught up in arrangements and stuff. Like, when I listened down to it, I was like, oh my god, I'm soloing all over the place. Like, what am I doing? But like, I'm like, well, that's just how it came out. I didn't want to get into that analytical side that a lot of us do when you're making music. You know what I mean? Like, everybody, oh, shorten this, lengthen that. Just like, these songs were how they were. Bob and I finished them up. I didn't get too crazy in the editing or like too crazy in the actual like arrangements of it all. They just kind of just developed, and I wanted to keep it really, really simple. I wanted to keep it like forcing myself to minimalize, like that's the other thing that happened, and that's a part of me that I wanted to kind of, as it developed, that I was really kind of in tune with, that I wanted to take that step back and do things I enjoyed doing in the first place that got me going when I was a teenager.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
yeah. Well, I was gonna
yeah, all
say,
that.
Well, I was gonna say like because my initial like review or in a way of the album or like my interpretation of listening to it is like exactly that, where like the simplest explanation is always the best, and like that's what I like. It's a very humble album. It's a simple album. We don't need like a 45-minute shredding guitar solo and like 2-minute epic introductions for each song. I think with Lay in the Sand or Verge of Yesterday, Sick of You, Heroes, it all just goes into it, and it's an easy listen.
Oh, I appreciate that, and it's kind of like that was kind of like, and once again, I put a time limit on it, because again, going back to like when I first started like playing music, and you listen to side A and side B, I always looked at it as side A and side B, and then being a lifelong musician, there was that period of time when everything went digital to CD. It was like, oh, we can put an hour's worth of music or an hour and however long on a CD. That kind of didn't interest me that much. I think a lot of records got boring. A lot of things were way too long. I love that limitation of like, well, this is a piece of music. Here's side A, here's side B. It was very clear. I wanted to keep it. My top number was like 35, 38 minutes or something, and I wanted to stick to that. I didn't consciously like self-edit my brain like these songs are too long or too short. It just kind of like that was a body of music that I put together that happened to fall into that category. And I was happy with that. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause sometimes I want to fall in love with a record,
Yeah.
like still being a fan. Like, I still listen to some of my favorite records, and I know why they're my favorite records because there's really not that much information. But when the information's condensed like that, to me, it's pretty special.
Yeah, and look, there are some bands that do like Dream Theater, Opeth. Like I love their longer songs because it makes sense for them to have long songs. Porcupine Tree. But like and the beautiful thing about them is I could be 40 minutes late and make it before their first song ends as well. So
Right.
there's always an advantage. But I feel like there always has been an element of simplicity behind it. And you mentioned this time limit thing, which I thought is really unique. It almost sets like a challenge for you in a way. Do you feel that maybe when you work on something too for a long period of time, that makes it harder to sort of maintain the initial spark of the idea?
It does. It does. Unless you're a player that can do that. You know what I mean? Unless you're that kind of musician where like that's your thing. And I really, like you're saying, I admire bands. Like I love Yes. You know what I mean? Like some of those Yes records from years ago when I was growing up. Like if you're that kind of musician and that's your love and that's what you're driven to do, I mean, I got the attention span of a fucking flea. You know what I mean? I only get in and get it done. You know what I mean? So I didn't put limitations on it, but those are the kind of songs I like. Those are the kind of records I like. And when I got into this, everything kind of fell into the category of, under a 4-minute song. You know what I mean? And it kind of, verse, chorus, lead, out. Like like intro. Um, but music is one of those things where I think the individual, whatever they're driven to do, works
Yeah.
for them.
Absolutely. And do you believe inspiration, this is like a debate I like to have with artists, is inspiration to get that spark? Is that really something that can be sought out? Can you go looking for inspiration, or is it just one of those things that has to strike you?
Well, that's a great question because anytime I've ever sought it out, it never worked out. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm going to go to the woods for a while and, I'm going to just get in tap with my inner self, or I'm going to go to these great shows, or I'm going to go get some culture, or I'm going to do nothing. For me, and it's kind of how this record happened. It's always my surroundings and what I'm going through, and it just kind of comes to me. You know what I mean? Like a chunk of this record, like because what I said before, I wrote some things earlier on before the pandemic. I thought I saw my friends like churning out really cool paintings, like I'm doing a painting a day, and I was like, I didn't do any of that. But then when I went back to listen to some of the things that I was messing around with here, I had the nucleus of the record. It was all there in that first year of the 2020, the first 9 months. So the back to the question is that like I think certain people are just driven when they're driven, and I think that's always been that's always been my thing creatively, even with art and stuff. I can be like an art geek sometimes, and I look at like some of these great artists of our time from the early 1900s and that stuff. Like that's my favorite stuff. They were just churning stuff out when they decided to do it, and that's kind of like my approach to it too. If I'm driven, like that's one thing great about having my own place. If it's 11:30 at night, I was like, hey, I feel like plugging the guitar in and firing it up. That's great. If it's 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 1 afternoon, I think sometimes when you're having to like, oh, we're gonna go make a record now, sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, of course. And
You know
also,
what I'm saying?
yeah, and I also think there's like different types. Like there's a difference between, I think, like creative energy and creative inspiration. Like if there's a band like a hardcore or a punk band or a political band that wants to like make a statement, so they'll, read about the certain situations on why they make that statement, and that's their inspiration. But then, like you said, there's some people who just feel that creative energy. They don't know what they're gonna say. They don't really have a preconceived vision, and they just go right into it. So I think that's always one of the coolest things of creativity. You can kind of like approach it from any different angle. There's no right ways.
Right. I know you're in New York, right? So
Yeah.
to me, like when I was living in the city, a big part of my inspiration was like the sound of the subway, all the sounds, natural sounds around me, the sounds of construction site, the sounds of like where I live in Jersey now, the sounds of an empty beach, just sitting there and hearing the birds fly around and the ocean crashing. That's very inspiring to me. Like all my surroundings are what inspires me, not so much of what I think I should do,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. And here's another debate I like to ask guitar players too, because 9 times out of 10, when I ask a guitarist or really just anybody, even not even a guitarist, how a song starts off, they say, it normally starts off with a riff. But like, I hear that so many times. Do you think we will ever run out of riffs in the world?
No. No, I don't because there's so many good guitar players out there and bass players and drummers and like you know, speaking for myself, a lot of my riffs comes from the things that influenced me in the first place. You know what I mean? So we're always going to tap into what initially got us going in the first place. You know what I mean? Like for me, and that's like the simple stuff. Like every time I hear like a simple song like say Jumpin' Jack Flash, right? That's what made me want to like pick up a guitar in the first place. So those simple things from my beginnings of playing, I still tap into that stuff, the MC5, the Stooges for one for me is a big one. But I don't ever think as long as people are able to take their influence and make them their own, I don't think there's ever going to be a shortage of it. Sabbath.
Yeah, of course. And look, there's plenty of bands where I have wanted to say, let me guess what your favorite band is. The band you sound exactly alike, but there's I think there's so much stuff like that has been, appropriated or, taken from here that it all just kind of naturally morphs over time.
Right. And there's something you mentioned guitar players. It's like, our other guitar player, Garrett, was here today. He's like such an excellent guitar player. And I laugh with Windorf about it all the time. Like, I'm pretty sloppy, and like I can only really like I'll push myself sometimes, but I can only do what I do. Like if somebody wants me to, I've played on a few things here and there for people, but you're gonna get what you get with me. Do you know what I mean? And those are the kind of guitar players I always really kind of liked. You know what I mean? A guy and like Garrett's unique in the fact that like he adds such an element to us guys because he has his own style and he branches out and he's more classic rock kind of stuff. He can do all the Sabbath stuff and all the Zeppelin stuff and Deep Purple. Like he'll show me how guys played stuff and I'll be like, I can like fudge through that. I can't do that. But it's a fun thing with guitar players. Some guys who are so technical, I miss the boat on that. And sometimes I love it and I can geek out with it. But other times I'm just like, oh, well, okay, next. I'll just get past it.
Yeah, and just by listening to this album, I could tell that that's kind of how you work in a way. And I was going to ask you this, comparing this solo album to Monster Magnet, because like I love Monster Magnet's music because you can almost kind of like tell in a way, like when I look down Monster Magnet's catalog, you could tell what will be off of, like Monolithic Baby or God Says No or Power Trip, etc. So like, um, but I feel like with this, there's such a simple an element of simplicity behind it. Was the creative process behind this a very different mind frame for Monster Magnet, or is there a usual method behind the madness that just applies to everything that you create?
Well, there's a definite method behind the madness when it comes to my stuff and my involvement with different records, and the most known stuff is Magnet. Dave and I get together, and it's just chaos, and it's so much fun. So, um, and I've always loved the role of helping Dave with his creations. You know what I mean? That's always been big. Like I said, I've always been very, very satisfied with that. Now, that being said, with Magnet, there's always like Dave and then myself and another producer involved. This record was all self-produced, right? So other than just playing the guitar, bass, and vocals, I took on the role of producing myself, which can be very difficult at times, right? So my initial thing was to keep a direct, simple approach, like the studio stuff and things. I want to be like, I'm gonna like record through. I'm gonna pretend that like I'm 17 year old again. I have one guitar, I have one bass, one pedal, and one amplifier, and one microphone preamp, and that's what I'm going to use to
Can
record this record. To keep it consistency and to keep it simple and to let things just like live and die with it instead of like, okay, I have all this great gear. I'm going to use it all. I wanted to backtrack because a lot of my favorite records were made at a time where things are recorded very, very simple. I'm not going to get into this like sonic masturbation. I'll just fucking say it. I think a lot of guys out there are like, oh, well, I got this, I got that, I got this. I'll reamp it through that. I'll do this, I'll do that, I'll do this, I'll do that. To me, it's just so time consuming that I would lose my creative process on that where I just kept things on all the time. And when I was driven to record, I'd come and record it. I'd pick up, I never changed strings. I never did that. I didn't worry about things being perfectly in tune. I just wanted to create what I was driven to create at the time.
can I guess that if that one pedal that you're using is it an MXR Phase 90? Like every because I have yet to see one single pedal board without it.
Well, to me, the pedal that I felt in love with on this, and Dan will laugh, was the Russian Big Muffs.
Oh,
the
really?
the like I was stopping by 30th Street Guitar on my way into work all the time, and I was seeing our buddy Jimmy, and like something got me. I dug out this old Russian Big Muff, and I just fell in love with the sound. I got tired of like. I remember so many producers telling me, "Oh, you can't use that pedal. It makes so much noise." It's like, "Oh, we'll get a better one." I'm like, I don't want a better one. I want to use that one. And so I was over by 30th Street, and Jimmy's turning me on to stuff, and it was a lot of fun in that respect.
Because I've yet to see one. Every time I see a pedal board, and
Oh,
it's funny too, because I've watched shows at local dive bars, and I've watched shows at stadiums. But even at a stadium, if I'm sitting in the bleachers, that vibrant orange pedal, yep,
yeah.
there it is.
Well, and there's a reason for that because it's so damn good.
Yeah, I mean, like
And they don't break. They're
they're
reliable.
the
You
McDonald's
can,
French fries of guitar pedals. Like the
right.
same ingredients, like the same tech, all the whole time.
Yeah, it's tried and true, and it's like there's a reason why, like in any style of music, you can make that pedal fit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like butter. It fits with everything. And it's funny. I was interviewing Richie Faulkner from Judas Priest, and like I mentioned that to him as well. Like, yeah, the MXR. He goes, "Oh, actually, I have one right next to me. It's just like
Oh,
always in a guitar player's possession."
yeah, there's one right over there too, and that's funny. Richie and I, we shared the same tech for a while
Oh, really?
at Vines. Yeah, fantastic tech, great.
Oh, that's awesome. Shout out to him because both of your guitar tones sound fantastic. So
Thank
yeah.
you.
Um, approach talking lyrically to a degree as well because taking the role of vocals. Was there at all maybe a similar approach that you took on a lyrical and vocal standpoint? Because I've always said that vocals are like a guitar solo as they convey emotion with melody and they have to fit in specific spots. So were you keeping it very simple too with lyrics or?
Yeah, and that was honestly bringing that up. That was the hardest part of this project for me. taking that role of like, okay, I have this nucleus, I have this record going right now. Well, I'm gonna have to sooner or later get in front of a microphone. I'm gonna sooner or later have to put some vocals on it. And that was the most uncomfortable point because I didn't really I had some things written. I don't consider myself much of like a lyricist as like, I don't really have much, but I'm not that kind of writer. Like so I tapped into a thing that the guy I work again, it always goes back to Dave. I see how Dave writes. Never, and I heard, when that's I'm not comparing myself to that at all, but like the one-liners. Everything starts with a couple of one-liners, and a lot of my favorite, like Lemmy's one of my favorite lyricists ever. Everything starts with a one-liner. So I just started putting some things together. It started to work for me. There were some things that I tried vocally and lyrically. I was like so into it. I would take a drive in my car and come back and listen, be like, what the fuck was I thinking? It sounds terrible. Like that's too many words. So I had to get into that process and learn how to self-edit, learn how to, carry a song vocally because I haven't done that in a lot of years.
Yeah.
So that was push to get that done.
Was there an instance where you had like the best lyrics ever, but they were always like one or two syllables over like every arrangement?
Oh, some syllables just are like the worst, like, like some T's and S's and certain I was like, "Oh my God, I sound like Dalfy." You hear your voice under a microscope, and like so I had to do this thing where it's like, "Oh man," like frightened of my voice and having to be like, okay, back up to learn how to back up from the mic so certain things don't jump out as much. And like, I'm like, why did that word's just, that's slipping me now. But yeah, that happens. And
Yeah.
I've seen it happen. I've recorded a lot of vocalists where I've seen that happen. So I knew that like I wasn't crazy. What I mean? I've seen some of the best singers, but guys I really admire get in front of microphones and like you see them do it live, it's one thing, but getting into the studio, it's another thing. So I had to just stay the course and just trust the process of that
Yeah.
because I saw other guys do it. And I've worked with enough people to know that that can be it can be an area of frustration.
Did you reach out to David after the making of this, being like, "How the fuck do you live doing this for so many
Oh
years?"
man, I told it if during the whole time I was like, dude, like if I knew it was going to be like that vocally, I would have just thrown in the towel, But like, he was very, very, Dave and I are really, really old friends, and he's very encouraging that the time was right. Just get it done. He had some downtime himself. He was taking care of some stuff for himself physically, and we had that was the other thing. Magnet had some things lined up that had gotten canceled, so I was like, I gotta, that drove it. He was like, "Do your thing, man." He's like, you got it, you got it. Just keep doing it. Just get in front of that microphone." And one thing that I learned from working with Dave when we make Monster Magnet records that don't wait to the very end to do vocals. Like just like as the songs are being recorded, get some, even if it's anything, like just sounds of a voice in places you envision it being. It's important to get that in there because you can do all the great guitar playing, bass playing, and all that kind of stuff. Once that vocal goes there, that's where all the attention goes. So I kind of did that. I mean, I did do that with his encouragement, just like, "Hey, man, you're going to have to sing sooner or later. So put that microphone up and start doing it."
I've hung out with bands in studios before where the vocalist, like, they'll be tracking this stuff and the vocalist will be like, "Oh wow, I'm recording vocals tomorrow. I should probably write something." So
Right. Well, then also too with vocals, it's like it was just always recording got into the habit of getting all of the music done first, and then all of a sudden it's time for vocals, and the vocalist is like left there to do all the vocals in a row. You know what I mean? Like on every song, and to me, that's just not really fair. Like I always and stuff that I have produced, I've learned to get that vocalist in there and let them start getting feeling the track out. Let them be part of that whole process. Encourage them. Hey, can I see the lyrics because I'm like getting ready to do this and I want to, carve out that little pocket. of this track and this recording that I know where the vocals are going to be. I want to know what you're saying because that inspires me as well. And I did that with myself to know that, like, okay, that's the, like, where's it going, what kind of melody is going to be on top, or what kind of dissonance can I get away with creatively. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? So it's a big important part of the process. 'Cause I always tell bands, like, hey, look at, I could do all the best guitar playing and bass playing that I think I could be, right? But as soon as I start to, if my stuff is completely out of tune and completely auto tuned, everyone's going to have something to say. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, and as good as you are, I don't care what band it is, as good as you are, I always try to tell people this: as soon as the singer opens their mouth, the vocalist opens their mouth, all ears go to that.
Yep. And
Attention,
no matter what
any
style it is.
music, no
No,
matter what genre it is,
yep. It's
as
so.
it should,
Yep.
as it should.
Unless you're an instrumental band.
Yeah, I always tell drummers, like, those. That's great that you can do all this stuff, but it's getting in the way
Mm,
of the vocal.
yep.
No one, it's a constant struggle with that stuff.
Yeah, and drummers can just hide behind their kit during the live show like motherfuckers. Just kidding.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. That's why, working with Bob Pantella is somebody I've known for a very, very long
Great guy.
time.
Shout out to Bob.
And when Bob committed to finishing this with me, I was really, really happy about it because of number one, our working relationship is great, and number two, he's a drummer. He's a musician who happens to play drums. He's so musical. He gets it. His drum parts for the songs just fit the riffs that I wrote. I was able to leave him alone with some stuff and be like, okay, hey, I got this. Come back and play a few things, in a couple days. I trust him so much, and mixing with him was like a lot of fun. Like two knuckleheads in like these two little studios. Like I had when I first got into it, I was like, oh, maybe this guy should mix it or that guy should mix it. I'm glad that we kept it right here at home with Bob and I to finish it out and mix it, and then get it over to Bill Skibby to master it. I kept the process. I wanted it to feel right, and I wanted it to feel like I was supposed to do it that way.
Yeah.
And that felt good for me.
Yeah, Monster Magnet itself has birthed so many great projects between this solo album, Atomic Bitchwax, and all that stuff. So, like, I'm always excited to see if any member of Monster Magnet is working on something. I'm always looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, we have such a creative thing out here in Jersey. We fly under the radar. There's been a lot of really great, music has come out of the pocket. We had, on tour, I was with Woody from Municipal Waste, and he was like talking about all these other bands from around this area, the drummers that influenced him to play drums. This band Lord Sterling, that like their singer was here last night doing this other weird project, and like there's been a lot of different creativity around this little Monmouth County, New Jersey area, between artists and music and things and stuff, that Magnet has been around from day one. And this is where Dave and I grew up. We've known each other forever, and I think one of the things that was like really great about this area of Jersey is that we're close enough to New York City at the time, from like when all this great stuff was going on in the city in like the late 70s and early 80s and into the mid 80s, that we were able to take that back out here, again, back to the influences, and be like, okay, well, this is how we're going to start bands and stuff. So that's been kind of cool.
Yeah, all the jokes that people say about New Jersey, I think it's just jealousy due to the fact that they wish they could have Bon Jovi, Monster Magnet, Dillinger Escape Plan, God forbid, My Chemical Romance, El Nino. Like I just mentioned, a bunch of different bands of all different styles. So
and there was a label out here back in the late 70s, early 80s, Mother Records, and they were like really instrumental in putting out like total independent local Jersey bands. And like Mark was the guy around to do it, and some of those bands went on to, like, they never got really well known, but when you look at it, they influence a lot of other people, like a band like The Worst, Dirge, this other band. Oh, who was the other band? Public Disturbance, Chronic Sick. You know, it was like a fun time, and all those bands were influenced by what was going on in New York, and we just kind of did it all out here. And there's all these playing. What was the other thing that was great about being out here is that like, yeah, we're doing shows at VFW halls, and wherever place that would let us put a bunch of amps in a drum set and a shitty PA. Like old man bars that didn't like have any kind of music. Oh, well, we'll let you kids come in here and play. It's fine. And a
That's
lot that was going on. That was going on throughout the country
yeah.
too, not just here. But it was a good time. I really look back at that time of my career and really, really appreciate that. I was so close to New York, but far enough away to develop my own thing and my own style, how I wanted to do it. It just kind of all started happening.
Which is awesome. And before we go, I also want to mention this. It's one thing to get the youth into the music and, inspire the young and stuff, but if the old man bars played, if you could get older people into your music too, that's an even bigger accomplishment as well.
Well, you're right. And it's like the other thing that I'm saying, I talked to a friend of mine this morning about it, that like, I think, people always talk about, oh, music, this is dead. This is a new thing that, there was a chunk of time where with, I think some things in music got a little stagnant, but I think what we're seeing now is there's a lot of younger people who are really into stuff, and they're really, I think we're going to see a wave of music that's not so homogenized and stereo, and kids are just going to fucking go for
Oh,
it. And I
100%.
really, and I think that comes, I think the mind, like, okay, how do I put this? Like technology, right? Like I come from the analog world, right? And I had a hard time learning how to embrace the digital world. Now, things aren't going backwards. I think that it's so badass that a young kid can make a recording on a laptop, on a phone, on a pad. If they want to buy a Ford, they don't give a fuck what it sounds like. They don't care about the new, coolest, greatest piece of gear. They can't afford it. So we're seeing this whole thing start to develop that it's really fun as an older musician to look back on. I would have loved this, and I would have done the same thing that these kids are doing. Whether it's like hip hop guys who are like the super duper underground stuff, doing stuff in GarageBand, doing stuff in all these different platforms that they can. It wasn't available to us guys back then. We had to save our money and go into like I call it, studios were very medicinal back then, meaning that it was like going into a doctor's office where there's all these microphones and glass and things. Oh, don't touch that. You know what I mean? Like now it's like, fuck it. Go fucking touch it, break it, record it.
It's such a breath of fresh air to hear you say that because, I was born in 1993. So, like, I got my music from iTunes. That's how I discovered music back in the day and whatnot. Like, I didn't go to record stores growing up, and people would always tell me all the time, like, you don't know what it's like. That was the real music back then. It's like, cool, good for you, man. You had Tower Records, I had iTunes. We still loved and embraced the music, so.
Right, and that's what it's all about. You know what I mean? That's what it's really all about, Alex. Is just getting out there and wherever you're gonna take it. Like whatever you're gonna do with it, as long as you're doing it. I'm not one of these people who are like. You see a lot of guys in my age bracket who are haters. You know what I mean? I remember the whole. I was confused with the digital stuff. I didn't understand it, and once I started to understand it and appreciate it, I was like, wow. I would have done the same exact thing.
Yeah,
It's just now, and I'm sure that if you grew up in the other era, you would have done the same thing that we did. It's like,
absolutely. I, I
why be a hater?
I ask people that, like, let me ask you this. So you had to get in a car and drive to Tower Records back in the day, hope that they had the CD that you were looking for in stock, and then hopefully it wasn't scratched when you bought it. You mean to tell me that if you had iTunes at that time, you wouldn't have braced it either? Like, so.
Right, right. And the same with like, and I always, my analogy with a lot of that stuff is that a good song is a good song. It doesn't matter if it's recorded in like with like the best of the best or the worst of the worst. You know what I mean? Like a good song is a good. It doesn't matter whether it's recorded on a laptop or the most perfect 48 track analog studio. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like when you're at the end of the day, when you're listening to it, whether you're listening to it on your phone or a turntable or streaming or whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. It's what drives you to get into the whatever song it may be, whether it's instrumental, whether it's classical, whether it's jazz, whether it's like old punk rock, whether it's metal. As long as you're listening, that's all I care about. People out there looking for stuff and having a good time with it.
And that's the main purpose of it all, and the perfect like way to sum up this whole thing. But before we
Yeah.
go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for such an
Uh,
awesome
and
conversation.
thank you. I appreciate your support. I'm really glad you dig the record, man. I'll stop in and see you guys soon.
Absolutely, man. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote for either this or Monster Magnet in terms of shows coming up, or what else?
Well,
You...
we're playing. Monster Magnet is playing the Desert Fest in Brooklyn on September 15th.
I'll be
Very
there.
happy to be playing in Brooklyn and being part of that whole thing. And
That's a
I'm
great
stoked that
fest. I
and
would.
I'm stoked that my record is out. It's taken a while, and I'm really happy with the vinyl product that we were able to do through Third Man Pressing. So that's really it.
The Desert Fest. I was there last year. It was such a great show. Baroness was playing, and but it's such a stoner rock fest that the Knockdown Center is huge. It's like the size of like 3 football fields. You couldn't see shit in there with how much people were smoking. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, good. Well, I'm happy we'll be part of it this year. We missed it last year. We were supposed to do it. I'm happy to be on it this
yeah,
year.
happy to have you here. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Phil Caivano, the debut solo album simply titled Caivano. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Alex, great to see you, my man.